Visitor Center.
Okay.
He's in a meeting with Commissioner Anderson right now that kind of got put together yesterday.
Okay.
Got some things going on.
So maybe we'll just head over there and set this idea.
I'll be in touch with him after this meeting, so I'll figure that out. Yeah, he did mention something about that. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Anybody with the state park system here yet?
Amy wanted to know if she can leave around 11:30.
We'll be done. We'll be done by then. Y'all ready? You ready? Good morning, everybody. Josh, can you check that sound up there, please? Good morning, everybody. My name is Brian Kellenberger. I'm the Director of Beach Operations for Walton County. Appreciate your time this morning and appreciate your participation in our 2018 preseason vending meeting. Before we get started, if you can silence your cell phones or any other devices you got. If you need to take a call, if you can take it outside. If you can limit conversation amongst each other inside the room while we're presenting, we'd appreciate. And during question and answer period, if we can respect everybody's opinions or comments or statements, I'd appreciate that as well. The purpose of this meeting is to talk about the beach vending operations on Walton County beaches. We'll introduce key players for the different agencies that will be out on the beach regulating and enforcing county code, as well as making Walton County just a better place so that our visitors can understand what rules and regulations are, as well as the beach vendors, and then of course our locals that frequent our beach as well. So we'll go through, there were some recent code revisions that were adopted on Monday the 8th. We'll go through those per code section a little bit later in the meeting so that we have a good understanding of that. We have not received the final version from our county legal department, and that final version will be what is published on the Walton County Municipal Code website. What we enforce is the written code. During that meeting, there was a lot of discussion about the revisions. Some of the draft copy was adopted, some of it wasn't, some of it was changed. And so we'll go over today what the gist of those changes were. But the written copy is the final version. It will be published probably first of next week. We'll make sure that it goes out to all the vendors that have that are in our database. So you're in our database if you were a vendor the last previous years and as you apply for your permit this year. So I ask that you make sure that the contact information we get, that you give to us is the people in your organization that should be the recipient of any information that may affect your business operations. If it's more than one email, then so be it. Make sure the phone numbers are correct and all that, because that is how we communicate with you on revisions, code revisions that may happen through the year, policy revisions that may happen throughout the year, and information like that. So it's imperative that we have your correct contact information so that you can get the information and you won't be encountered by Jeff and company on the beach in the form of enforcement action. So before we get started, my name is Brian Kellenberger. I'm Director of Beach Operations. So I'm in charge of beach maintenance and beach code enforcement. Jeff McVeigh is our code enforcement manager. So he's in charge of the beach code enforcement crew. Josh Irvin is our beach maintenance manager. He's in charge of all of our maintenance crews that clean up the beach, keep our amenities in good shape. And his department handles capital improvement projects such as new accesses, the multi-use path, repair, construction, and all that. David Vaughn is with South Walton Fire District. He's the life safety, beach life safety coordinator. He handles all the lifeguards. He will also be speaking for Sammy Sanchez today, who is the fire marshal and is the person in charge of their bonfire permit program. Lieutenant Adam Falk is with the South Walton Sheriff's Office, or Walton County Sheriff's Office, and he'll be talking about what the sheriff's role is on the beach today. Matt McGarrah is with South Walton Turtle Watch. They are our turtle monitoring service provider. So they monitor the beach every morning for new turtle crawls, and they also operate the texting program, which is what releases vendors to set out their equipment in the morning. There'll be some more discussion about that, exactly what they do by each one of those people. Normally we have a state park representative here today. They cannot make it, so Jeff will give a brief discussion on what they do on the beach, how they manage their beaches a little bit differently than what we do. And I think that's all the people in the room. John Callens is our beach ambassador program manager. We have a beach ambassador program that is part of our code enforcement program. Laurie Reichenbeck manages the South Walton Beach Ambassador Volunteer Program. They are an independent nonprofit agency of volunteers that do the same function that we do with our paid personnel, and that is inform people on the beach of beach-related codes as well as what we call beach etiquette. There are some items that are not necessarily a code or codified and are an enforcement action, but there are some things that beach etiquette that are necessary for the enjoyment of everybody that comes to the beach. And so we appreciate Laurie's work in that area. All right, so getting started, I'd like to introduce, we have some new staff that came on some last year. You probably know these people. Daryl Godden is a new code enforcement officer. Eric Bosco, one of our code enforcement officers, he's not here today. Buddy Burgess, Adam Siegler, Dan Ratcliffe is in the room. Nick Ware. Tricia Goff is one of our code enforcement administrators. You've probably talked to her on the phone. Melanie Walters, another one of our code enforcement administrators. These two ladies handle the permits, beach vendor permits, special event application permits. They handle a lot of the inquiries for what is code, what can I do, what can I not do, why did I get this, so they can be reached in our office. Amy Wilkins is one of our beach ambassadors. She's back in the back. We'll have a few more of those this year on the payroll. We have some full-time, and then we also hire some part-time seasonal. You'll see them out and about, usually in UTVs or walking or maybe on ATVs. If you have any questions about anything, you certainly stop one of them. Any questions about anything that you don't try to guess at it, call us and let's talk about it and make sure that we all understand it the same way. So that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, and he's going to go through the basic functions that we do and information on how we do it.
Good morning to everyone. I apologize for not shaking hands and trying to kind of stay out of Dodge, but I figure y'all don't want me to share this little bit of head stuff, so maybe the next time I'll shake your hand, but it's not being rude. I just don't want to, I don't want you like this. Anyway, let's, for those of you that's been here, you've heard this conversation lots of times. Code enforcement's not here necessarily to be everybody's enemy, although we wind up being the enemy a lot of time because we get put in a situation where we have to enforce the ordinances that the commissioners have put in place. The ordinances are generally pretty simple. They're a couple of big ticket items that we deal with more often than not is turns out to be now vendor zones and leave no trace issues. A lot of times the leave no trace issue winds up being we rented a Sunset chair to a couple and then the guy forgot to go back and get it, or they weren't finished when we went to pick up and they were going to put it up by the stack and it didn't happen. So things like that's where y'all put us kind of in a bad spot where we have to levy out enforcement action, but it's based on decisions that your guys make on the beach. So if your guys that are working on the beach are making those decisions for you, then we need you as the managers or owners or the financial backing to these companies to make sure that the guys with their feet in the sand understand what the rules are just as well as you all do. So one of the things that we've started seeing more of, and it's evident here today, is more companies are bringing their staff with them to these meetings so the staff hears this conversation happen. So that way it puts it on us and makes us the person that's telling your guys that we have to hold you accountable just like we do the owners. So as far as the code enforcement guys go, there's 11 of us now that stay on the beach. It's easier for us to be in more places at one time, and we still hear the well, I'm just going to do it until code enforcement tells me I can't do it no more. So that puts us in a bad spot when it happens, and we don't want that to be the situation. However, that's still the situation more often than what most people think. So work with us. We'll provide you a copy of the ordinance. If you got a question like Brian says, especially about ordinance, what the actual meaning and interpretation of it is, call us, ask us. If you disagree with what we say, more than one time last summer we involved the county's legal department to get interpretation from the attorney. So if you don't agree with our interpretation of the rule, have the conversation with us here on the street and not in the courtroom, because that's tends to be kind of what happens. We wind up having to issue a citation on something that winds up going to the judge, where if it's just a misunderstanding, let's handle it here on the street versus in town. So I mean, we don't want to do it that way. Again, we just get put in that situation. Sometimes that's not what we want. We want to be able to run into y'all at the restaurant and be able to speak and not, elbow one another going out the door. So one thing that we're going to do different is in the past, when we issue a citation, we call the company and the company says, so-and-so worked that section of beach last night, and when he went to set the chairs up, let me get him to call you. Well, he calls us, and I didn't get the list, and I didn't know that set was there, so we write a citation to an individual that may or may not have been on the beach at that particular time. So when we issue citations, part of the permitting process has always been that the owner of the company or a manager, somebody in management, submits the application and signs off on all your permits if you have a delivery permit or multiple site-specific permits for whatever. So in an effort to make sure that accountability goes back to the person that's actually made the violation, the person who violates the ordinance to us is a person whose name's on the back of the chair. So in doing this, if we have a situation with ABC Beach Vendor Company, then whoever's name's on the permit that signed that I assume the responsibility of this permit, that's the person that gets the citation. Okay, so we just want to make sure that early in the year we know this, and it's something that we had this discussion with some of you guys last year about, well, write me the ticket. Well, write him the ticket, or who gets the ticket. So once our guys complete their investigation, determine the violations occurred, the person on the permit is the responsible party. Okay, so I just want to make sure that that's said, and I'll probably repeat it. So if your name is on the permit, then you're responsible for the actions that your guys take on the beach, and that's that's what it's gonna take for the guys on the beach to get educated. Because you'll be more apt to educate them on what the repercussions are if you get the ticket for their actions. So just help us with that. Liability insurance is another thing that we've been running into some issues with. The girls are both about this deep in insurance right this minute because insurance has expired at some point in time through the season, and we've been less than proactive on your insurance. So one of the things that'll be a matter of policy for us, if we are involved with you with for whatever situation, you got a leave no trace issue, you outside a vendor zone, or somebody complains that you move my stuff or whatever. Anytime we have an interaction with a beach vendor, then we're going to pull your application and verify that all your information's up to date. So if that happens, your insurance is out of date, then that could go a couple of different ways. Administration has the ability to suspend your permit because you're not insured, and then the officers also have the opportunity to issue a couple of different citations on that because that creates a couple of violations in itself. So the insurance, as far as we're concerned, is just as important to you guys as it is to the county. So it's protecting you, it's protecting us. So make sure your insurance stays up to date. That's something else, like I say, that's going to be a standard practice on our part. Anytime we have any interaction with vendors, the guys get a slow day, they may just pull through and flip up 10 or 12 just to verify that. So just help us by keeping your insurance up to date. Make sure you got your updated permits. Your permits are no good after February 1. Obviously, most of the vending don't start till on over in the March, April timeline. So if you're not putting stuff on the beach, you don't have to have a permit February 1st. However, when we start seeing your stuff on the beach, then we're going to want to know where your permit's at. Understand that the permits were well over 100 permits this year, so don't expect to bring permit applications on Monday, get permit applications back on Wednesday. Give us a couple of days. There'll be 3 of us doing it. Harold Jr., Dave, and myself do all the permit reviews. So when you submit your permit, there's a checklist. So you yourself go through your checklist and make sure that everything that's on the checklist is there. And if you wonder, well, do I need this or do I not need this? Phone call, text message, email, whatever. And then we can answer that question, tell you where you need it or you don't need it. So when you bring it in, you don't have something that you need, then it goes back into the queue, and in 3 or 4 days when you get a chance to come by or whatever happens, it just pushes your permit out. So that checklist is there for your benefit. Take the permit, take the checklist, make sure that everything's there. That way when you turn it in, we run through it in 15 or 20 or 30 minutes, and then you get a permit back. So just take that checklist and use it. We're going to issue a event calendar for special events. So if you're in one of those situations where you have the Sandestin or Rosemary's, the places that has the annual special event permit, there'll be a calendar that comes out. So it'll be your obligation to make sure and keep that calendar up to date. So if the guys get out with an event at your location and there's not an event on the calendar for that day, then that makes it a non-permitted event. So just make sure and keep your calendar up to date. That way the girls in the office see everything that's going on. The guys roll up on it on the beach and they know it's there, and they don't have to dig quite as deep to make sure that everything's in compliance if they've got it there in front of them. Statutory requirements, a little point of contention maybe between our staff and some of the vendors. Florida statute requires that one, we issue a warning that a violation has occurred prior to issuing a monetary fine unless it's irreversible damages or a threat to public safety. So it also says that anything on the record is there for 5 years. So just because we're going into a new season, the statute requires that those warnings stay there for 5 years. So you already had a warning. Don't expect to necessarily get that warning first up 2018 because you hadn't had one on this year's permit. There's still some discussion in-house of whether or not the fine amount keeps riding. So to some vendors, that would be pretty detrimental to start off with your first one of 2018 with a $500 ticket. I'll seek some clarification on that and let you guys know either via mass email or whatever prior to, the first of the vendor season actually getting started. But I just want to make sure that we're clear that the statute requires that stuff stays on the books for 5 years. So just, I don't want any confusion there when somebody gets out and writes you a ticket for $100 and because you got a warning last year. But statutorily, it's required to stay for 5 years. Driving, we've had the conversation about driving on the beach, the whole 1,000-foot thing. So if you got 1,000 foot of continuous beach, you can get a permit. You can get an addendum in your permit to allow you to drive, to set up and tear down on 1,000 foot of beach if you got excess of that. One of the things that was a misunderstanding on our part doing the permits was if you had 1,000 foot of beach that was 8 different owners, but it equaled 1,000 foot of beach, then it give you the ability to have the driving capabilities there. After the conversation with the county attorney, that's actually not it. It has to be 1,000 continuous foot by the same property owner. So don't throw rocks at us if we have to turn down some driving permits this year. But again, that's one of those things that's, we'll double check, make sure we got clarification before we start entering or issuing these permits to make sure that everything's going down the right rabbit hole when we get ready to go. So another thing that's being considered is preseason and postseason driving permits. We talked about in the past, we've given 3 days for a site-specific location to deliver the stuff on the beach. 3 days at the end of the season, but based on a permit, where they could haul their stuff out or haul your stuff off the beach and whatnot. Unofficially, we're going to establish dates that on this date and this date and this date will allow driving on the beach, and for the purpose of delivering and tearing down. And instead of having 20 days where this vendor's doing it for 3 days and this one's doing it for 3 days, and so for 20 days you got vehicles on the beach, but it's all different vendors. We're going to try to communicate with the guys that need to use that to get their stuff on the beach and get their stuff off the beach, and try to establish a day, 3-day, 5-day window that the most amount of people can get it done in this amount of time and get it done, instead of everybody calling us and complaining about y'all and complaining y'all and complaining about y'all and calling us and complaining about us because we done it, we let you drive, and all the fun conversations that any one of you that's driven on the beach to deliver, tear down your stuff have probably heard. So we just want to limit that as much as we can. Take some load off of us, take some load off of y'all, and try to get it all done in a reasonable amount of time. I'm not going to really get in the ordinance conversation. Brian's got quite a bit of stuff to cover on that. The biggest thing that we want to make sure everybody understands is the leave no trace and the leaving your stuff on the beach, the storage at the toe of the dune. One of the issues that we're having is people that have site-specific locations that have 4x4x8 boxes that have to be 10 foot apart, and they approve it on the plan. They draw it on their site plan. We approve it. It looks good when we drive through there the first 3 or 4 weeks and look at it, and then it winds up getting filled up with paddle boards, and the area between the boxes get filled up with chairs, or chairs get stacked somewhere down the beach running east and west versus north and south. So that's one of the things that we want to make sure that when it's approved in your site plan, that's your site plan. So if you have to add a stack of chairs, make sure that it still maintains that 4x4x8 and that 10-foot distance in between those. Really, that's more of an issue where you got less beach. You got a deeper beach, but you got less linear feet, if you will. So then people start stacking more stuff in a smaller spot to cover what beach they got. Just help us with that if you can. That'll be a huge help. That'll keep some interaction between us down. Another one of the things that we were really good at earlier on, I don't know that we're as good at now, and that's just talking to y'all even though we don't have an issue with y'all. So I personally always try to at least roll the window down and wave, or you get salt in your truck with this window up today, and tomorrow you can roll that window down, but you get salt in it from the other. So the guys run by you with the windows up, we want to make sure that we're at least speaking and stopping. We have an opportunity. We don't want to interfere with you when you're busy, but we want to make sure we got a line of communications. So if you need to talk to us, you can talk to us. If we need to talk to you, we can talk to you. And then at the end of the day, It's all about you guys trying to make money and make a living, and it's all about our guys trying to make a living too. So just puts us sometime in an awkward situation with one another, but it's what it's got to be sometimes. So I think that's about what I got. I'm not going to touch the state park maps here, so when it comes state park time, we're going to let Matt have that conversation. So I'm going to turn it over to Lieutenant. I'm sorry, what's your point now?
I was gonna go over the ordinance change.
I'm sorry.
Did Tricia want to processes, or did you cover that, didn't you?
When the question answer thing comes up.
Okay, on Monday, the 8th, we had the final public hearing on code revision adoption. And so there was a lot of discussion on that, included in your booklet, right in front of the what's called the 2017-05 ordinance. There is a bulleted piece of paper titled, it's got the heading of that these bulleted items were the items that were changed on January 8th. And so I'd like to go down those. And I want to emphasize that this is a summary, and it includes the basic gist of the change. However, we have to enforce the written code, and the legal department has told us that will be the final version of it as it was adopted will be published probably on Monday. It has to go to a state agency for what's called a courtesy notification. They have to acknowledge, and then it gets published on what's called Walton County Municipal Code. And so if you type in your web browser Walton County Muni Code, it'll take you to the different codes that are affect Walton County. So you have municipal code and you have land development code. The two sections of codes that we enforce are Walton County Municipal Code, Chapters 22 and Chapter 23. So in about 2 weeks, that final version, as the way we will be authorized to enforce, will be it. As soon as we have the final version, we will send it out via mass email to all the people that are in our database. Once again, it's why it's important to make sure that the responsible party for your organizations have given us the correct information. So starting on that page, if everybody's there, it basically will go down through it numerically. So that the first section in 02 is definitions. The first item that we changed was we included a UASs, or unmanned aerial systems, aka drones, in the definition or term aircraft. And so we have a definition section, and then we have other sections that pertain to particular items. Section 2258 deals with aircrafts. And basically what it says is that you can't land or take off aircraft, other aero apparatuses. It lists a whole bunch of different types of things, helicopters, dirigibles, and all that, from Walton County beaches. So we do recognize that FAA regulates drone activity in the air. What our code says is that you can't land or take it off from a public beach. So be aware of that if you're a drone enthusiast. The next one is under 2202, definition of special events. We have a lot of property in Walton County that is owned. They own to the main high water line. Some of it owns to the toe of the dune. Our special event application or permit process has a couple of different triggers that would require a entity or a person wanted to do an event on the beach, be it a public beach or a private beach, to apply for and receive a special event. One of the items we came into last year was we have property owners that were enjoying their property, and they may have pulled a trigger. One of the triggers is the amount of people. And so what this does is it defines what is a private party. And so what it is, it's affording protection to a Gulfront property owner that is having an event that includes family and friends and does not put them into the category of a special event. It also protects the other residents in the neighborhood where there may be a wedding venue house that is causing some stresses and anxieties in the neighborhood because of the amount of people that come to this house for a wedding event when it's really a residential neighborhood. So what this does is it offers some definition so that we can discern between, is it truly a private property, or is it somebody that has rented a house and there's a wedding going on? Once again, it's just a definition to offer clarity. Next one down, tents. There was some conflict, ambiguity in the definition of tent, so we added a description of nylon as being a fabric that a tent can be made of, and then defined clearly that it's more than one pole. Before, it had some definition that was not clear on that. And the reason is because we treat tents differently on the beaches in Walton County. Chapter 23 is customary use, and in its basic form is a uninvited guest on private property that is beach area is allowed to use that beach area in a customary beach use. And so that means what you would normally do on the beach, enjoying the water, sunbathing, fishing, sitting in a chair on a towel. It prohibits the use of a tent. It does allow the use of a umbrella, no larger than 7 foot in diameter. I highly encourage you to read Chapter 23. It did not get changed any, so the form that it is in on the website is the form, and read it to become more aware of it. But that's the basic provision of it. And since tents are treated differently, we had to make sure we had correct definition. The next one is dealt with the definition of vending, and it had, the previous version had a inclusive list, and so we had that changed to only the pure form of the definition, and that reads: vending means offering for seller rent as part of a contractual agreement any services, goods, materials to be consumed or placed on the beach, in the bay, or in the Gulf or their adjoining waters. And we wanted to remove the inclusive or exclusive list because then that gives room for argument. If you go by the definition, it's very easy for us to discern if you are offering a good or a service for a fee. And if you are, you meet the definition of vending, therefore you're required to have a vending permit. Moving on down, 2254 is the section that is regulation of use and conduct on the beach and water bodies. It primarily addresses general public use, but it also addresses vendor use as well. And so a couple of things that were made in there. One of them had to do with bonfires. So our South Walton Fire District is the people that regulate bonfire permits. We regulate bonfire activity on the beach. Previously, they were 24-hour permits, and the rule was you had to have them cleaned up and off the beach by 8 a.m. the following morning. That was with an understanding that handling hot fire pits was probably not a good thing late in the evening, and that we thought it would be conducive to proper cleanup. Throughout the couple of years, we've learned that that's not necessarily so. The general practice by most bonfire providers is that they stop the production, the event, at a reasonable hour. I know it's different amongst some of you, and they go ahead and remove that pit that evening. So the new code says that the bonfire pit and any evidence of the bonfire, meaning the wood that's not used, the wood that was used, the charcoal, anything needs to be removed by 1 a.m. that evening, that night. And so it'll be up to you, the bonfire provider, to determine what is the appropriate time to extinguish the fire and to tell your client that the time is up. So that was one of the changes. The next one, we added some verbiage in there that says it's unlawful to dump the remnants into our garbage collection stations. So it's up to you as bonfire provider to make sure you get all your stuff off the beach into your vehicles and appropriately dispose of them in a safe manner. The reason we put that in there is because we had situations where people dumped hot coals into our garbage collection stations, which are brown scrim bags, and they burn, and we actually had some poles burn up. So that's why I put it in there. Moving on down, we added some language that prohibits charcoal grills on the beach, and it provides for a gas-fired grill of a certain size, and that's 225 square inches. And so that means a charcoal or a gas-fired grill, propane-fired grill of approximately 12 by 18 rectangular or 16 inches in diameter. which lends itself to your basic tailgate or tabletop type grill. So if you're providing a grill as a service to your clients for whatever reason you're doing it for, keep that in mind. You can no longer use a charcoal grill. You have to have a gas or propane fire grill, and it can't be larger than that. If you're out there using it as a personal use, keep that in mind too. Next item down, personal property on the beach between 1 hour after dusk and 1 hour after sunrise. It shall be unlawful for any person to leave an item of personal property on the beach between 1 hour after dusk and 1 hour after sunrise unless the permit has been granted by Walton County. It shall be unlawful for a person to leave an item of personal property 1 hour after sunrise on the dunes. And then it says that a TDC maintained, owned, access, lease. What that does is it's part of our Leave No Trace program. And so a couple of key words. Leave means to be unattended. On the beach means the area between the water's edge and the toe of the dune. In the dune means from toe of dune to top of dune. What we're trying to do is limit the amount of personal items that are being left at our public beach accesses. Once again, I know that this is not necessarily addressing vendors, but I wanted to bring it out because it was a change so that you can get the word out to your people. Hopefully that'll filter out into the general public as well. And there's also, or when we get to the venue section, we'll talk about that. Next one has to do with generator use on the beach. So if you're a special event provider, wedding event provider, and you're using a generator, there are specific rules to the size, output, noise level of generator, and there's a change from a 20-pound fire extinguisher to a 10-pound. So a 20-pound is your typical red one about that tall. Your 10-pound is more like the ones you can buy at your big box stores, your hardware stores, that normally you'd keep in your kitchen or on a marine-type vessel. Still needs to be Class A, B, C. We felt that change was appropriate because they're more easy to acquire, and therefore you would probably more than likely have it with you. So if you have a generator on the beach, you got to have a fire extinguisher, and it's got to be 10 pounds minimum. Next one is has to do with tents on the beach. So previously we had passed a code that said you could have a 6 by 6 by 6 maximum size tent. That became very stressful to people to understand last year and hard for us to regulate, also because of the different conditions where that can be used on the beach. So we changed it to a 10 by 10 max, and so that pretty much includes the average pop-up tent you can get at any of our retail stores. And I don't know how many of you rent tents in conjunction with your umbrellas and chairs, but there's an accompanying section of that in 2260, which we'll get to in a minute. 10 by 10 is the size. We're not worried about the height as much now, so it's 10 by 10 square. And that is in this section of the code, that's at what's considered a public beach. There's also some accompanying verbiage in there that says on privately held property, which would affect some of you in a specific place permit situation, that it doesn't limit you to the size of the tent. So we didn't quite get away from a uniform code, but we got closer to it. So on public beaches, no greater than 10 by 10. On a private beach or a beach that's under the mean high water line, you're not restricted to the size of the tent. All right, next section down is 2260. This is beach vendors. The first one we changed was we struck under policy, food and beverage vending operations are not permitted on the sandy beaches. And so it was taken out of that section of the code and it was reinserted into D12. So you're still not allowed to vend food and beverage on the public beaches. However, under your specific place permit, if your specific place permit includes a property that has commercial entitlements, then this restriction does not apply to you. So let's think a resort community that has commercial entitlements of restaurant in or near the beach area, then they are allowed to bring food products, beverage products down onto the beach for their clients. So the key words there are specific place permitted vendors on property that has commercial entitlements. Item D3C, previously we had what was called a 10-foot clear corridor from the lifeguard station to the water's edge. That has been increased from the toe of the dune to the water's edge. So where we have a lifeguard stand, 10-foot wide corridor from toe of dune to the water's edge, and so that would really be from the clear corridor of the toe of the dune to the clear corridor of the water's edge on public beaches. On all beaches, we have the clear corridor of the toe of the dune. Only on public beaches do we have the clear corridor of the water's edge. Number 10, beach vending operations limited to more than 50% of the public beach frontage and public beach access. What we inserted in there was it is unlawful to manipulate our beach vendor zone delineators. So on our regional beach accesses, we have the lifeguard station is typically one of our zone delineators, and then we have a PVC 4-inch pole with a horizontal arm. As you know, most of our property lines run at a 15-degree angle off the beach, so they're not perpendicular to the beach, and that's why that arm is on there, so it gives a clear indication of where that line is on the beach. At our neighborhood beach accesses that have public beach associated with them, the vendor zones are smaller and more frequent because it's along linear beach, like in the Seagrove and the Sea Haven area, which is Montgomery Street. Once again, it'll be PVC poles, and it has on there vendor zone, and it has an arrow pointing to which way the vendor zone is, and there'll be a accompanying pole on the other side of the vendor zone with the horizontal arms pointed in the approximate direction. Those things tend to move around a lot. We're not sure who's moving them. Sometimes they move in favor of a vendor zone. Sometimes they move against favor of a vendor zone. So we know that different groups are moving them. We didn't have any language that said we can make that unlawful. We now do. So, bottom line is let's leave the vendor zone delineations alone. And then the last one is the vending of tents greater than 10 by 10 feet. So now you, instead of doing a 6 by 6, if you're vending on public beach, you can vend a 10 by 10 tent, the average pop-up style tent. Some other items that were talked about that did not change was storage at the toe of the dune. Vendors are allowed to store their product at the toe of the dune. Delivery vendors delivering to public beach are allowed to store their product at the toe of the dune, provided that equipment is to be rented the next day. We understand that most of rentals agreements in this era are a weekly and often sometimes an annual contractual agreement, and so you meet the definition of being rented the next day. As we've talked about in previous meetings, one of the main gripes of the average person that is visiting a public beach that is not renting beach equipment is they don't understand why they have to sit behind unused vendor equipment. So I encourage everybody to try to develop a mechanism that if you're not going to be using that beach equipment that day, if there's some way that you can figure out a system that if you have a weekly rental, that if they're not planning on visiting the beach that day and using that equipment, if they can notify your company somehow so that you can get the information to the people that set up your equipment to not set up that particular set, we highly encourage that. That's what we call a ghost set, and even though we recognize that it meets the definition of being rented the next day because you have a weekly or annual contract, the general public doesn't understand that. All they see is an empty chair, and they want to know why they got to sit behind an empty chair that's not being used. So some of our larger delivery vendors and resort community vendors have figured out solutions to that. Like I say, specific place vendors, you have exclusive use of the beach. If whatever chairs you set out, it is between you and the owner of that property. But on public beach, the people that are servicing clients north of 30A that are using public beaches, like I say, if there's a way you can figure out, if you're not using the product, don't set it out. The other item was paragraph D8, which is the upland property authorization for vending on public beaches that happen to be seaward and adjacent to Gulffront private property. That did not change, and so we have vendor zone setups on those public beaches, and the interpretation last year was that the way that clause reads is that the upland property owner can say yes to vending or no to vending. They can't say yes to any particular vendor and no to any particular vendor. The way we had previously interpreted that is that if you wanted to vend in that vendor zone that was adjacent to that private upland property, you had to seek written authorization from that particular property owner. It's not that way anymore. Middle of last year, it was interpreted by county legal department that if they allow vending, they have to allow all vendors. Okay, so as the vending season heats up, and some of those people become aware of that, because not all of them were aware of it last year, be aware that some of those vendor zones may move. This is on Neighborhood Beach Access, Associated Public Beach, and some of them may go away. As soon as that is determined, either by written correspondence from the property owner as to what their desire is, we'll immediately make it known through a map revision of the vendor zones and through mass emailing to everybody in our database. And then, of course, we'll have somewhat of a little bit of a grace period where we're warning, but not a very long grace period. The other thing that was talked about in the revision meeting that could seriously affect vending operations is currently there is under Section 2262, which is the acknowledgement of the whole vending or the whole chapter, there is a provision for vendor permit revocation. And right now, it's not defined very well. It is basically just says that if you don't abide by these rules, your permit may be revoked. With such a drastic action or an action that could affect your business like that, it was important for the county commission that we define how that process works. And so a committee has been set up to basically develop a standard operating procedure as to how the different non-compliant citations a person would receive, what severity are they, how we assess severity to it, and then basically how many of a certain type of a non-compliant enforcement action do you get against you before you then are recommended to a administrative review board to review for your permit, possible revocation of your permit. And so they asked us to do that very quickly. So we're meeting here in a week. We'll develop we'll go through a roundtable discussion, develop these processes like I just described, and then that'll probably be adopted into code sometime during this 2018 vending season. And it goes back to that over the last couple of years, there's been some comments made through the grapevine we've heard or social media that it's just the cost of doing business. We're limited on our fine amount at $500 by Florida statute, and has gotten back to the powers that be that cost of doing business. I can get as many tickets. I'll accept 10 tickets throughout the year, and we realize that that no longer is a reason to abide by the code, and so the county has tasked us to come up with the SOP, and then it will just be a process. It won't be by arbitrary decision making. It will be your company has received 6 citations for leave no trace. Therefore, you've reached that threshold of number of citations, and you're now being recommended for permit revocation. So everybody keep that in mind as we go through the year, and strive to remain compliant. Last year, over the last 3 years, our vending industry has done a great job in learning the code, abiding by the code, accepting the code, becoming instrumental in helping code revision, and so it's a good sign, and it's good for your industry. It helps your industry remain or have the opportunity, particularly on public beaches, to make a decent living and provide for your families. And so I've encouraged all of the other groups of vendors, self-regulate so that you don't get regulated off the beach. And it's just in any industry that's the case. especially where you're working on public property and you're providing a service to the general public. Is there any questions about ordinance revisions or anything like that? Yes, ma'am.
Looks like there was one about placement of tents.
I'm sorry, yes. On the placement of a tent on a public beach, in the change to the 10 by 10, it also included that tents are limited to the top or upland 1/3 portion of the beach. So if you are renting a tent, you're constricted to the vendor zone, and you're also constricted to the top 1/3 area of that beach. If you're a general public person using a tent, coming down on public beaches, you'll be restricted to the top 1/3 of that beach. On specific place permits, it is whatever the you and the property owner have contractually agreed to. If it's a prohibition or a zone, we won't enforce that because it's a issue between you, specific place vendor, and the property owner that you have the contractual agreement with. There may be some issues with customary use. We would enforce those, but if it's not a customary use issue, in other words, if they are an invited guest to that property, they're not exercising customary use. Yes, sir.
Will the roundtable that you talked about, the standard operating procedure for your permit being revoked, that meeting that's going to occur, is that a public meeting?
There will be a public workshop. At first, there'll be a committee to, review, basically talk about what these items are, and then the county commission will have a public workshop to take in vendor input, public input, and then from there it will be massaged into a draft version of a code revision, and then a public hearing for the code revision. But yes, there will be opportunity for general public and vendor input.
Will that initial committee meeting be public?
No, it'll be a staff committee, and so, but nothing will be decided at that. It is basically putting together a standard operating procedure, conceptual design, so to speak. We got to start with something, and then from there, it will take public input like we do on any other code revision process.
And then one more question, when did it kind of come up? I think in the past, the tickets would reset every year, so you started rolling off. When did that kind of come up for discussion, and what was the reason for that being?
It was discussion with the legal department on standard operating procedure and how Florida statute should be applied. So code enforcement et al. Is governed by Florida statute 162. There's 2 chapters to that. The first chapter deals with traditional property-based code enforcement. The second chapter deals with what we call instantaneous enforcement action. That is what we operate under. And so in reviewing of that process, or what is required and what is allowed by that Florida statute, it was determined that there is a period of time that it does not reset every year. So we're actually waiting on final determination by a legal department as to how we're supposed to do that. Jeff brought it up because we know the vending season had actually started, so to speak. You're preparing for your vending season. It'll be here pretty quick. But we wanted to get it out there right now that it is something that will be defined here in the immediate near future. Yep. Any more questions on code revisions? Anything like that? Okay. Yes, sir.
Come back to the tent question a moment. That understanding correctly, you said the first 1/3 landward part.
Yes, sir.
Do that, like 10 by 10 tents can't be further out than that, whether it's vending or private party.
On public beach or beaches that are maintained by the county. So we
Beach access, they can't be out close to the water. The 10 by 10 tent has got to be landward.
correct. Yeah, so we have, public beaches that are in the form of a regional beach access, parking, restroom facilities. We are the upland property owner. On those, we'll have signage on the beach that clearly has the line of where they can't go past. So that affects general public and vendor. And then on the neighborhood beach accesses, we have some accesses that are only a certain width. Some of them dump out onto public beach that is long and linear. Some of them the size of the public beach varies. And then the other thing that varies is the beach, okay? Down in our, Seacrest area, our beaches are very narrow. And when you, so it says the top 1/3 of the beach. After you take out the 15-foot clear corridor and the 15-foot water corridor, Toadine and Water's Edge, that doesn't leave a whole lot of beach left over. And so there's some cases where there's public beaches that there won't be a tent zone, so to speak. We're right now making these maps based on our public beaches, and we'll distribute those to all the vendors so that they have understanding. Our beach ambassadors, be it paid or volunteer, will have this information, be educated on it. And we understand that that's going to be a tough thing for the general public to understand. We hope that good communications to our communications department through news media, social media, beach ambassadors, that we can get people to understand, what's acceptable and where it's acceptable on the beach. Yes, sir.
I do some properties where it's private beach, the homeowner associations used to have signs to correct tents allowed back here.
Mm-hmm.
But when the sign ordinance was passed,
Yes, sir.
then we had to do away with the signs.
Right.
Is there no any kind of leeway, or was there anything?
Good question. All right, so signs, post ropes, and fences were regulated by Section 2255. That section was challenged in court last year, and the court ruled in favor of the plaintiff. And so that we have been asked to stand down on that particular code section until another form can be written and adopted. So, yes, you're allowed now to place signs on the beach. What I do ask is that they be of appropriate size and maintained and all that. But right now, under county code, there is not a code section that regulates signage on the beach. Any more questions, comments about code revisions? If you got any questions coming up, like I said, we'll publish this here fairly quickly. As soon as we get it from legal, look for it in your email boxes. When you get it then, you review it. Any questions, email us, call us. We'd rather have a good discussion about it now than a discussion about it on the beach. Anything else? All right. So, Lieutenant Falk with Walton County Sheriff's Office.
How's everyone doing today? I'm Lieutenant Falk. Lieutenant Scott Hugaboom couldn't be here today, but him and me are going to be the ones responsible for the south end for the spring break operation, responsible for the beaches to make sure everything's safe is out there. Again, we have a spring break operation that we have put into place. Our dates of those that we've designated is March 3rd through April 14th. For our spring break operation, again, we're going to be doing a zero tolerance campaign, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with. We've done that for several years now. Some of the things that we've changed for this year, and part of it's based because of the calls for service that we had last year. We've increased the number of deputies that we're going to have out there at one given time that's solely designated to the spring break operation and to working out there on the beach to make sure everything's safe for everyone. So we've done increase that number of deputies to 18. We'll be doing. We have 5 beach deputies that are going to be solely designated to the beach, and they will be out there if you guys need assistance. All we ask is that if you see them handling a call, if you see them coming down the beach, running their sirens and their lights, clear the area. Try to clear your area that you're responsible for. If you have an emergency, please don't call the deputy himself or the beach deputy himself. Please call dispatch. What that does for us is going to allow us to get a quicker response to you. Because if it has to go through the deputy, then the deputies, if he's busy on a call, say he can't answer the phone, first of all, or second of all, he can't, but he's busy on a call, then he's got to call someone else. It takes more time for us to get you to you and solve the problem. Our main concern is safety. It's safety to you, safety to the citizens, safety to the visitors that are coming down here. Some of the other things that we'll be doing is we are going to be putting cameras out there, which we have not done before. Part of that is because the increased number of calls for service and some of the things that we had to deal with. Most of you may be aware, unfortunately, the number of arrests we made last year went up. And we made 680 arrests last year, strictly during spring break, which was up from 2016. 2016 was approximately 293. We were not expecting that. But part of the reason for that is because our zero tolerance. Second of all, is increased number of people that are visiting our county. So what we're trying to do this year is just keep it safer for you guys. All our numbers, as far as my number and Lieutenant Hugaboom's and dispatch, should be in your pamphlet. If it's not, I'll be more happy to give you our number so you can have, if you have any questions, any concerns, anything we need to help you with, you can contact us and we'll try to help you through that. Let's see here. And I believe that's really, there's not much else that's changed other than we're increasing the deputies, putting cameras out, and we're there for you guys. Any questions? I'm not going to tell you that information. We have some designated places that we'll be putting those out, but this is for you. This is, for the, unfortunately, we have those out there that do commit the crimes, and sometimes our witnesses, we cannot use as a witness, but if we have that camera out there, it helps us solve it, and we can take care of business. Anyone else?
Morning, everybody. My name is David Vaughn. I'm with South Walton Fire District Beach Safety. I want to thank you and echo some of what he said. We all cooperate, between what the fire district does with the TDC, code enforcement, Walton County Sheriff's Office, and what you guys do to help us out there. I used to do beach chairs, and I get what you guys are up against, and we appreciate your help. And I know that a lot of times you guys, we have 14 locations now, but we can't cover all 26 miles. We do the best we can. We respond, and we appreciate your cooperation. But to piggyback on what he said, call 911. Don't call the tower first. If you're within on a location where you're close to a tower, yeah, of course, make that call and also reach out to the lifeguard. That's especially useful also with lost children. Go ahead and try preliminarily to get in touch with the lifeguard. What we do is about a 10 to 15 minute search, because sometimes parents get panicked. There seems to be an inverse proportion of, my child's been gone for 45 minutes. It's usually 2 or 3 minutes, and we're like, is that your kid over there? Then we also get and I'm sure you guys know this, mom will come up and my kid's been gone for 5 minutes. He's 4 miles down the beach and has been gone for 3 hours. So, we want to emphasize that use 911 when necessary. Reach out to us where we are. Just to recap, our mission is safety, of course. Good business for you guys is safety. And I'm sure most of you know that, and we've had years of great cooperation with you guys, and we really appreciate that. Our season begins March 1st, goes through September 30th. We do have 14 locations, 10 of which are with the TDC at the regional beach accesses, 2 of which are at Rosemary Beach, and 2 of which are at Sandestin. For any emergency responses, again, I'll echo that, along with the county ordinances. Please keep those corridors clear at the 15-foot between the toe of the dune and the sandy beach. We need that to be able to get our rovers. We do have 13 ATVs and 3 light-duty trucks. So, between ourselves, the code enforcement vehicles, and the Walton County Sheriff's vehicles, we really do need that emergency vehicle access. It's crucial to us. And a point that I really need to hammer is that at those locations that have emergency vehicle access, or for you guys, beach access to get your vehicles down onto the beach, I know that especially when it's busy and those parking lots get crammed up and you're doing site delivery stuff, please don't block the ingress to those emergency vehicle accesses. It's a problem. Dunal and Ed Walleen, down at Lakeshore Drive on the east side. Not so much, but over by Whale's Tail. We really can't emphasize enough that us being able to get patients and or resources on and off the beach. We don't have enough vehicle accesses because of the terrain that we have here in Walton County. We're not likely to get many more emergency vehicle accesses anytime soon, so we need to make best use of what we have. Please don't block them. Even if you think you're just dropping off and you're going to run some kayaks or some paddle boards or some chairs down there, 5 minutes there, that's when Murphy strikes. And it's happened to us a couple times over the last few years. And that's probably the main pet peeve that we have. So if you guys can help us out with that, that's probably the main thrust of my argument on that. When it comes to actual emergency responses, I know a lot of you are either former lifeguards or have some training. It's not your job to go out into the water to help people. Of course, we always appreciate it when you do, but you don't need to put yourself at risk. Call us, call 911. Sometimes we're not as close as we'd like to be, but you guys have to, that's a business decision again, but we're not encouraging you to do that. But we're also going to thank you because we know it gets done. So for those of you who have had experience with that, thank you. What to expect, not much has changed. We're going to be doing what we do, and we look forward to another year of working closely with you guys. Do you want me to go ahead and get on to the bonfires? Beach safety related stuff, does anyone have any questions? Good, nice and simple. Bonfires, Brian already touched on it. Main things to note, I hope it's a relief to you guys. That was our intention in seeking clarification from the Board of County Commissioners on the bonfires. 1 a.m., we got a little bit of pushback from a few individuals saying, well, what if I want to party all night and I want to keep my bonfire all night? We felt that 1 a.m. Was good for you guys. You guys were working late. I know you guys are out there at 5:30 in the morning sometimes, and then having to do the bonfires stacked up. Hopefully that 1 a.m. actually helps alleviate some stress on you guys, and it just creates a nice cutoff time for you. Does anyone have any questions on that or concerns? All right, grilling. Yeah, that's pretty simple. That doesn't mean we're hoping that it doesn't mean that people try to game the system, but we wanted to seek clarification on that, and we hope that also provides opportunities for individuals and for the vendors to make use of that. Otherwise, the bonfire permits, fireworks are still illegal. We appreciate the messaging that you guys have, getting that out to the people who come down. And we know that you have to deal with that. Nothing's changed on that. And I think that's about it. Anyone have any bonfire-related questions? All right, thank you.
Matt, can you speak a little bit about vending on state parks?
I'm Matthew Allen. I'm Great Beach and Deer Lake State Park Manager. The state parks, our main objective is to provide resource-based recreation while preserving and protecting the natural and cultural resources. So basically nothing's changing. If you're vending in the park, you're not vending for the park or vending in the park, you're vending for our customer of the park. And that means that you're delivering to that customer, and when that customer is done, then you're taking away the product that you brought them, whether it be a bicycle, umbrella, or a chair. We don't allow you to come in the morning and set up for people that are supposed to be there. We allow you to bring it to that person when they show up to the beach. So I want that clear. There is no driving on the park. If you're going to vend in the park for a customer and you would like, I'm always available. Call and talk to me or my assistant, or come in and visit with us, and we'll help you understand how that works. What we want to provide our customer with is the best service we can. A butler service is what we're looking for. Right now, we don't have any contracts with vendors, and we don't see that right now in the near future. If it changes, you guys will probably all be notified. But anyway, that's where we're at right now. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Since we do a lot with special event permits, a lot of people have asked about, do they allow special events on state parks?
We do, but we have our own permit. So if somebody wants to do a special event in the park, they'll contact me or Patrick, probably me, and I'm going to fill out that. I'm going to run it up the flagpole to my supervisors, and it may go up higher depending on and then it'll come back down. But there is a fee for those also. So we do races. It seems to be the big one. We've had several races, and I think the county's done some with the same vendors. And you guys have a contract with those same folks, and then they also have it with us or even the forest in some cases. But there's also other types of events that can be done. But it's got to fit our venue. We don't want to put something in the state park that's not natural, that doesn't kind of fit what we're trying to show, you know. So we don't want to take away from our natural park. Any other questions? Thank you.
How's it going, guys? Matt McGarrett, South Walton Turtle Watch, and I also handle all the vendor relations. Pretty much every year, you guys have seen what we do. Nesting season starts May 1st and runs through October. I'll explain to you a little bit of what we do during nesting season. So the beaches get walked every morning, 7 days a week, unless weather dictates otherwise. We start basically as the sun's coming up, sunrise. We do our best to clear the beaches as fast as possible, and then we send out a text. The texting program is in the book. What I would advise you guys to do, because I'm sure a lot of you guys don't keep these books, but throughout the season I would get a lot of calls saying they either still weren't on the system or didn't know how to sign up on the system. Maybe just take a picture on your cell phone of that page and send it to all your guys. It's really simple. But that was probably one of the number one excuses. They just didn't even get the text. They didn't know about the texting program. I think a lot of times they were making it up just to cover their butts. But get them all signed up. It makes things way easier. One thing I noticed this season during walking is some of the vendors or your guys were trying to time the walk every day. They kind of got an idea of like, oh, this is when the walker would pass, and they would try to set up. It changes. You know, throughout the season, the sunrise is going to change. We may have a different walker. There's days where I'm walking, the next day it could be like a 65-year-old lady. She's not going to clear that section as fast as maybe I will. So that's why the texting program is there. Another thing that may happen is we may encounter a nest on the walk. If that happens, we have to flag this nest, and we have to call some other people to come and get the nest and then continue our walk. So that may hold up a walk for a few minutes. If any of you guys get to the point where you think either it's got past the time, other vendors are setting up and you're not sure, call me. I can check the text right there and find out if the section's been cleared, or I can call the volunteer and find out what's going on. If you guys want to write my number down right now, it is 706-442-8998, and it's probably in the manual, is it? Is it in the manual?
It is.
Okay, it's in the manual too. So you can call and we can let you know what's going on with the section. Another thing that may happen is you guys may encounter a nest. Either we missed it or we haven't gotten to it yet. If you guys ever run down on the beach and you encounter a nest, call me. And what I'd ask you to do is make sure, for one, you don't put an umbrella by it. You're not sure where the eggs are. You could easily stake into the eggs. Maybe put some chairs around it, mark it off for us. I've had that happen in the past, and we truly appreciate that, and we'll get some down there immediately. Once the nests start hatching, there's a strong chance you guys might actually encounter hatchlings that are either hiding in the dunes or get under your box or something. The best thing you could do for that is get a bucket or a small cooler of wet sand, put them in there, put a lid on it. They dry out really quick in the sun, so you want to keep them covered, and call us and we'll come get them. Strandings, or if you encounter like an injured sea turtle, once again, call us. Try to keep people away from it. We'll come down and we'll handle that. Let's see, I'm trying to think else what I need to cover. Other than that, I'm here really to work with you guys, and I think each year it's just going to be my third year doing this. The line of communication has gotten better every year. What I want to let you know is I'm not here to actually get you guys in trouble. I'm actually trying to avoid you guys getting in trouble. So every violation gets sent to me, and then I try to call you guys and just take care of it that day. Let's not have a reoccurrence, and then we don't have to get these guys involved, and it's just an easier fix. What I will promise you guys is if a walker's walking and they take pictures of some violations, what don't to do is don't encounter that person and get upset with them. They're doing what I've advised them to do. I've advised them not to be combative, not to argue with you guys. They're simply going to take a picture of your chair, the logo, not you yourself. I've told them don't ever take pictures of your guys, their faces. Take a picture of the situation, send it to me. What I'll promise you is I will not blast this on social media. I'll call you guys first. Now, if things persist time and time and time again, then I'm going to have to move it up the ladder or try to take stronger action to have it fixed. But at the end of the day, I just want to take care of things easy, work together, and that's the best way to do it. For the most part, you guys have been great and have helped us out a ton. But anybody got any questions for me? Anything they want to know?
The end of the season text program, I know we're into
Yeah, what we're...
code and sort of walk work together really well, which helps out, especially with the fall break.
Yeah.
So what the problem is the contract we have with South Walton Turtle Watch for the turtle monitoring program allows for them to stop walking after Labor Day, right? And so then that creates a problem of the texting programs. What we did this past year is we just sent out a blanket text at what would have been considered the appropriate time of the beach being walked. And so it's still it's typically before around 7:30, which is the other allowable time. So it's turtle text time or 7:30. They still walk the beach some looking for hatchings.
Yeah, we're checking nests and stuff too at the same time.
And as the number of nests that appear on the beach hatch out, then that becomes less frequent and all that. So we'll do the same program there. We didn't get code changes like we thought we might that would address that. So we'll address it with an operating procedure. And that is, it'll just be a blanket text at a time that's agreed upon, between all concerned.
Now, could you address vendors setting up after the walker comes by them when they overtake?
Yeah, and that's what I kind of covered that, but basically what she's alluding to is, like I said, sometimes you guys, in the past, I remember a long time ago, I think even before I was doing this, the walker would walk by, and if you saw the walker walk by, you could set up. But then there was confusion. Was it a walker? Did the walker walk by? Was it someone else? And that's when we came to the texting program. At no time is it acceptable to start setting up until you receive that text. And the way the app works is I know exactly to the second that text is sent and it's recorded. So, I've had vendors tell me, well, I got the text. Well, no, you didn't. I know you didn't get the text. So just, monitor your guys, let them know. I mean, we are getting you guys on the beach, honestly, way earlier than 7:30, 95% of the year. Towards the end of the season, it gets a little late, but we are up there. We're moving fast. Even our slowest walkers on the slowest day, you guys are still getting on the beach plenty early. So just stick with that because this texting program, I think, really does help, and I don't want it to go away. I don't think you guys do either. So...
I'm a photographer and we do sunrises, so I wasn't aware of this whole situation. I knew the walker, but I don't set anything up, so I didn't understand where no one's addressed me at all. So if it's just me and the client, or the client may have 5 people with them, I know what a nest thing looks like, and I would obviously go near it, or even the trail, but what's the rules on that?
The code addresses beach equipment or, personal property. You as an individual are not subject to the turtle texting program.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
Yeah.
we could,
Yeah, and most people use their better judge. Yes, ma'am.
encounter tourists grabbing sea turtles out of the water.
Yeah, so if we...
What can I tell them legally?
Well, it's against the law.
I told them.
Yeah. We've run into the same thing, and
Do I need to call you when I see one?
yeah, I would. You can, yeah, let us know, because...
Happens as the sunset quite often.
Yeah, I would call the sheriff because he can actually come down and take care of it right. Yeah, they'll respond, and you can call me too because I can make a note of that. I can fill out proper forms, let know there's been harassment of sea turtle that's taken place. So, good question. One thing I forgot to cover real quick, guys, with your bonfires, do me a favor. Let your guys know that the nests are very easy to spot. It's 4 stakes with orange bright ribbon taped all around it and signs on it. Just let your guys know when they go to set up their bonfires, just self-regulate themselves, look with the nest, make sure they're far enough away because we have nests that will hatch and these things go everywhere. So just remind the guys, I've seen sometimes where they just throw their stuff up and they don't pay attention to the nest at the toe of the dune. Just be aware of that because it would help us out greatly. Anything else? All right. Yeah.
How's it going, guys? My name is John Callens. I'm one of Walton County's beach ambassadors. I'm going to keep this brief. I'm a little under the weather like a lot of people are here. So most of you are familiar with me and the other beach ambassador program. It's been going on for about 8 years now. It's been around that long. Before the last couple of years, it was just one guy or girl or somebody going up and down the beach, educating people about proper etiquette on the beach and ordinances, and also giving them ideas about what amenities are in the area if they're new to the beach and aren't familiar with it. We have actually more contact with the general public than we do the vendors, but we do help code enforcement out with and help you out in different aspects of what you got going on the beach. I want to thank our two sea turtle protection factions both for being here, both of them, South Walton Turtle Watch, Matt and Lori with the Friends of South Walton Sea Turtles. They both are a big help to our organization, both the beach operations and the beach ambassadors. South Walton Turtle Watch with the the beach walking program, and Friends of South Walton Sea Turtles are our volunteer beach faction, and Lori does a great job of organizing that and keeping it together and helping us out on the beach with what we do out there. We primarily work very closely with code enforcement and helping them out with keeping beach etiquette what it should be. We also help out maintenance in a few different ways, and also South Walton Fire District and Sheriff's Department with keeping them advised on what we see on the beach and stuff like that. We've got, last year we had 5 beach ambassadors on the beach. This year we're probably going to have about 3, maybe 4, I don't know, doing the same thing. But that's pretty much it. Anybody got any questions? Okay. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Josh Irvin, and as Brian alluded to earlier, I'm the beach maintenance manager here for the TDC. I always appreciate Brian and Jeff saving the best for last, and so I'll try to keep this short. We're currently a crew of 25. We work 7 days a week, about 18 hours a day throughout the summer season. Our primary functions were to remove the trash from our collection stations and maintain our facilities. Last year we got about 591 tons of garbage from the beach, which is quite a bit. Quite surprising to know there's that much garbage disposed of on the beach. Very few changes for 2018. One of the things that we did do this off season is map all of our trash collection stations. So we now have GPS data on each one of those. In the event we have a storm, we can make sure we get them back in their previous location. So I would ask that you guys, not move those bag holders. We haven't had an issue with that in the past, but in the event one's in your way or one maybe is shifted, we have moved them in preparation for a couple of storms this past year. So just get with me, give us a call at our office. I've got some business cards there on the table. We'll be glad to come out and move those and be sure to get them mapped appropriately. Also, if you see a need for additional bag holders, again, reach out to our office. We'll be glad to accommodate you if it makes sense to do so. Leave No Trace program is going to remain the same. We have an anticipated start date of March the 1st. I stood up here last year and said that I was hopeful that our signage efforts on our bags, we started printing that message on our bags last year, was going to help reduce the amount of things left on the beach. What I discovered was actually the opposite. We ended up with about a 96% increase year over year. That equated to roughly 20,000 items. I will say that some of that is a result of maybe our means and methods for counting those items. We'll find out this year. I did learn that the employees that volunteered for that role last year have agreed to volunteer for that role this year. So our means and methods shouldn't change. So at the end of this year, we should have a pretty good idea where we are in terms of our efforts in communicating the need to remove those items. Vendors, what can you do to help us? Basically, you guys are out there on the front lines every day, so you are, a vital component of what it is that we're trying to do. Help us keep that access corridor clear. Not only for life safety functions, but also for our daily functions. You guys are there, so if you could kind of help us communicate the importance of that. If you see somebody trying to set up, especially now that we're going to have this restriction on tents on that back third, so more than likely on some of those narrow beaches, you're going to have people trying to set up in that 15-foot corridor. So please, if you could communicate that would be great. Tidal erosion, that's a continual problem out on the eastern end of the county in particular. So it gets very narrow, especially when we're trying to drive our vehicles up and down the beach to get those, that 591 tons of garbage off the beach. As Brian and Jeff both alluded to earlier, bonfire remnants, they have to be removed by 1 a.m. Again, I've always encouraged you guys not to place those bonfire remnants in our trash collection stations for obvious reasons. Now it's a requirement in the ordinance. So I don't think we've had an issue per se with vendors doing. I think it's more of a public, person kind of using those, not really understanding the effects that they may have. But again, 1 a.m. and please do not discharge your remnants in our collection stations. Let's see here. If you guys see any issues or any hazards out there on the beach as it relates to our assets, our facilities, please communicate those to us. We'll be glad to go out there and take care of those. In the summertime, it's hard to keep track of everything. We do have some software in place to help with that, but the more eyes, the better. We try to be proactive rather than reactive, so any help with that, obviously, we would certainly appreciate that. And again, going back to Leave No Trace, if you guys could continue to communicate that to the beachgoers, inform them. We have provided quite a bit of signage up and down the beach, but still the spoken word always goes a lot further than a sign. Lastly, it's required for you guys to remove your trash from the beach every day from your operation. Haven't seen many issues with that. You guys are always good with that, and we certainly appreciate that. So we would encourage you to continue to do that and to help us with that. So in summary, I look forward to working with you guys this year. I think it's going to be a fairly busy season. So if you have any questions or any concerns throughout the year, like I said, my cards are on the table. Please feel free to contact me directly. You can contact me through our office. However you'd like to get a hold of me, I'm here to help in any way that I can. So thank you.
Thanks, Josh. All right, appreciate everybody's participation today. Your book is an excellent resource. It's got all of our names, contact info, everything, all the different agencies' contact info. It's got permit application information in there. Got the code. The last thing I want to impart is make sure that we have your correct contact information. If you can't get it today, get it to Trish via email in the near future. There are going to be some additional information coming out here in the next couple of weeks in the form of the vendor zone maps, the final version of the code. As we adopted that new code this week, we are compiling a list of items that need more direction on in regards to the 1/3 zones, how we apply those and all that. Those maps will be coming out. We hope to get all this information out to you before the season really starts so that it doesn't affect you too much. But do keep in mind that those things can change during the year, and we'll be notifying you via the mass email system. So that being said, is there any other questions before we break? Yes, sir.
Talk to us about when you do a mandatory evacuation for the beach, everybody has to get all this stuff out of it.
Right.
The problem I occurred last year is, I'd like to take into consideration, maybe looking into, is when it's time to re-up the beach the next day.
Yes, sir.
Times out of 10 right after a hurricane, it is beautiful.
Right.
All the people have been cracked up in their houses, the first thing they're gonna do is hit that beach. You're waiting, last year, you waited until 9 a.m. to give us permission to drive back out there, which is about like saying, here, kids, go play in the streets, middle of rush hour right now.
Yes, sir.
I'd like you to take into consideration, open it up, if possible, the day before, the evening before, where we can get out there, get our work done, and get out everybody's way, be ready for that business, because we do have customers that have paid for the week and everything, and they want to get out there and sit in their chairs that
Yes, sir.
they paid for. Take advantage of that time the day before, or even take advantage of that early morning hour or two before everybody's out there.
Right.
Waiting until 9 a.m. it's just creates pure chaos for everybody.
I agree.
Trying to get through there, as you know, usually the beach is very narrow at that time.
Oh, yeah.
It becomes very difficult. I did see a couple of your guys early in the morning, and it was so bad, I didn't see them the rest of the day, and they know it's a pain.
Yeah.
So I'd like to take consideration if you go up earlier, maybe the day before, or early that morning, give us a chance to get out there.
We do. We'll work within the constraints that we have. If a local state of emergency has been enacted, we certainly have to wait till that has been lifted. And then we do have an assessment process that we undertake, but we're out there before sunlight doing that. But I understand what you're saying. This past year with a storm event, we actually, and getting stuff off the beach prior to it, we recognize that there's not enough time once the local state of emergency is enacted. And so we actually started before that with the recognition that we needed more time. We do have to be, understand that while we regulate the beach, there is different beach ownership relationships that we have to be, recognize. And as our beaches have become more populated and we have more congestion, we have a different type of ownership, the different factors that affect us change. And so we're trying to, in other words, we're trying to please everybody, and you know how that works. But I am cognizant of what you're requesting. Any more questions, comments? Yes, ma'am.
So the permit is in the book that we do, each year. This is it in the book, right?
We have a copy of it here. We have a copy available online, or we can send you to you via email.
But you have a copy here too?
Do we have copies here, Trish?
I don't have extra copies.
But it's in, I can use what's in the book, yes.
You can.
And is it still, do we go to, on 83
Yes, ma'am.
to deliver our
Mhm.
stuff? And when does that process start?
You can start dropping them off whenever, but we're not gonna start reviewing them until we get the official clarification on the ordinance and the fee schedule.
Which we hope will be Monday.
And that's on 83, right?
Yes, ma'am. It's Highway 83. Our office is on Highway or 83, which is known as Blue Mountain Beach Road, about halfway between 98 and 30A. West side of the road, nondescript green warehouse back in the woods. Our sign is out by the road.
And your hours are, what are your hours?
Our business hours for permitting are from 8 to 4:30. We would ask that if, don't come in at 4:25 with a permit request. You can certainly drop it off, but don't expect for it to be processed that. It takes a day or two depending on permit load, and, what has to be reviewed to process them. Any other questions, comments? Appreciate everybody's time today.
Okay.